The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 114.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the Entrepreneur's Library. Today we have Dave Richards, author of The 7 Sins of Innovation, a strategic model for entrepreneurship. Again, if you would like an opportunity to win this book, become a VIP at the elpodcast.com and you'll have that chance. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Welcome, Dave, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
My pleasure.
Before we dive into your book, will you take just a moment to introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about you personally?
Sure. I live in the UK, but I'm an American and a Canadian. I've got 5 great kids, 2 relatively little ones, 9 years old, and we live on the south coast of England. I work all over the world. I enjoy public speaking, mainly on the topics related to the book. Plus, I work with a variety of organizations ranging from startups to multinationals, essentially helping people create more success.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Now let's jump right into that book that you just mentioned, The 7 Sins of Innovation, which was made available, or is actually being made available this month, December 2014. And Dave, we're going to move quickly, but we're here to cover the top questions that our reader/listener would like to get answered. And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing The 7 Sins of Innovation?
Well, essentially, it represents a lifetime of learning and really an effort to understand why the vast majority of innovation efforts fail. I've worked in what I often call the bleeding edge of innovation for most of my career, and I've seen fabulous successes, but also spectacular failures. And I've always struggled to understand why some absolutely great ideas failed to materialize or commercialize, and others succeeded. Other ideas that sometimes, in a way, weren't so great, but nonetheless became very successful.
So there's a lot of great books on innovation and some that come out each month. So what would you say makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic?
Well, I think a lot of the books I see, and by the way, I love them all, but a lot of books on innovation tend to be quite academic or theoretical, and also a lot of great stories about entrepreneurship and innovation are really personal stories. They're great stuff and very, very interesting, and in fact, I refer to a lot of them in my book. But my book is really more about trying to make sense of it all, trying to draw together various theories, various ideas, and more to the point, practicalities of innovation, and pointing out why most efforts fail, but also what to do about it in practical terms.
So how would you suggest the reader engage with your book? Is this something they can jump in and jump out based on what they need at that time? Or is this really meant to be a book that you start and finish all the way through?
I think that either approach could work. There are sections of the book that are devoted to specific types of enterprises, so startups, social enterprises, large companies that need to rethink their whole approach to innovation, government agencies, public enterprises. So there are sections that I think might be of interest to specific readers, but I've tried to write them in a way that they're applicable. Some of the points or messages are applicable to any type of innovation effort or any type of entrepreneurship.
Now that we know a little bit of the background behind the book, let's take a deep dive. Really what I want to do is hand you the mic for the next 5 to 8 minutes and really allow you to just give us a deep dive, take us through and let us know what your book's all about. Will you do that for us?
Sure. So I start with definitions. And the reason I start with definitions of basic things, basic concepts like innovation and entrepreneurship is because looking out there at the literature on innovation and entrepreneurship, I see a lot of inconsistency. So there's many different definitions of innovation that are, frankly, sometimes just confusingly different, and other times seem to be somewhat contradictory. And I wanted to first get clear about what I'm trying to talk about. So I define innovation in terms of creation of value. I define entrepreneurship as anyone trying to innovate. That's not a new concept, by the way. I mean, Drucker defined innovation that way. But if you look at the official definition of innovation, namely the Oslo Manual, the definition that's used by governments and academics worldwide to not only define innovation activity, but also therefore to be able to measure it, it's just fundamentally flawed. So I felt we need to rethink our concepts of innovation, rethink our whole approach to how we're trying to innovate, that it isn't just about trying to introduce new things to markets, whether or not they're valuable, which is the Oslo definition, but it is beyond that. It is about delivering value, whether that value is monetary or not. So if a customer, if any of us experiences value as a result of someone's effort to improve value or increase value, then that's innovation. And beyond defining innovation and entrepreneurial activity, then really move into talking about why it's so difficult. Because the reality in the world of innovation is that the vast majority of innovation efforts fail to deliver the desired results. They fail to deliver return on investment. They fail to deliver new value that's measurable or verifiable based on customer experience or other stakeholder value. That essentially we need to look at the reasons why the vast majority of innovation efforts fail. And that's what I really attempt to do. And that's what the 7 sins are really looking at, the fundamental reasons underlying the failure of most innovation efforts. And of course, with every sin, there's a corresponding virtue. I could have called the book The 7 Virtues of Innovation, but I think it's the more interesting story is why do far more than 90%, it varies across different industries and different sectors, but far more than 9 out of 10 innovation initiatives tend to fail. And as I said at the beginning, my inspiration was to try and understand why so many efforts fail, but more to the point, to also try and point to practical ways in which these efforts could succeed to a greater extent. So after going through the various sins of innovation, I get into specific, in effect, prescriptions for how to succeed. So perhaps I should go through the specific sins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there is a sequence. They're all kind of related, but fundamentally, I think one of the key sins, or the first one, if you will, is pointless purpose. So pointless purpose can come in many different forms, but it fundamentally lacking a purpose, lacking a real sense of purpose, a real connection to a customer need or a market need, just not understanding the point of an innovation is a key example of pointless purpose. One of the most common forms of that, in my opinion, is what I call technology push. So that's when really clever technologists, inventors, engineers, whatever they may happen to be, come up with a so-called solution and conceptually throw it over the wall and say, I have the solution. Now, where's the problem? Who needs it? So in a sense, very often I've witnessed in various organizations I've worked in that technologists will come up with a solution, throw it over the wall to sales and marketing and say, go figure out how to sell it, find out who needs this and what they're willing to pay for it. And that, I think, is an example of pointless purpose. But fundamentally, pointless purpose in the broadest sense is all about an entrepreneur not having a really strong connection to a purpose. In other words, a real mission. What are you trying to do as an entrepreneur or as an intrapreneur to make the world a better place? And if your idea, if your innovation isn't connected to some fundamental purpose, some way of improving the world, then in my view, it's pointless. And that's the first sin of innovation. The second sin is impaired vision. And this is, in a sense, it's the flip side of purpose, in that you can think of purpose and vision, a vision defining success as being two sides of a coin. That coin is strategic intent. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? How would you define success? So your vision for success, for what you're trying to achieve, what it's going to look like to succeed, is fundamentally connected to purpose, but takes it a step deeper in terms of understanding the specifics of what you'll achieve, the specific big, hairy, audacious goal, the specific ways in which your innovation will benefit your customer and will benefit any other stakeholders involved in the enterprise. So that's the second sin, vision, impaired vision. The third is an inability to articulate what you're trying to do. So the third sin I call apathetic miscommunication. It's miscommunication that can be the result of apathy or lack of clarity or lack of ability to articulate. It's the inability to express the value that you're trying to deliver and to express it in a way that attracts, excites, influences your potential customers and other stakeholders who should be involved potentially in delivering or in receiving the innovation. These, by the way, Wade, these 7 sins fundamentally relate to 7 key aspects of human psychology, which relate to specific centers of the human psyche, starting, as I said, at the top with purpose, and then vision, and then, in a sense, voice or communication, then moving down to, in effect, what we might think of as our heart or the core of our being, which is all about relationship. And the corresponding sin there is disengagement, which often results from ambivalence. So ambivalent disengagement, the failure to build and engage in effective relationship with all of the key stakeholders required for successful innovation. So, of course, there are many, right? Stakeholders can include, of course, customers, but also investors, other partners, suppliers, all of the relationships that are important in any enterprise in the delivery of value. So that's in effect the relationship center of human psychology. And fundamentally, I think any organization can be defined in terms of specific relationships, and therefore any effort to innovate is all about trying to engage in relationships to increase value. And I also often say that value can only ever be experienced and delivered in relationships. So if you think about it, think about your existence. We only ever experience value in relationships to people or things. You know, if we're thirsty, we experience value in relationship to a glass of water, right? We drink the water and we were in effect nourished by it. We derive value from it. It's a relationship. And of course, if someone gives us the glass of water or someone sells us, say, a glass of lemonade, so it's our relationship to the water, the squeeze of lemon and the pinch of sugar in it, it's all about relationship to whoever is delivering that to us. So again, that core sin, that fourth sin, is about ambivalent disengagement. It's about failure of relationship. beneath that, in a way, unconnected to that, but another step lower or down in our journey now through human psyche, is leadership. It's all about power. It's all about the empowerment of resources. And the sin, I call, sort of tongue-in-cheek, frightfully disempowered followership. In other words, the opposite of good leadership is followership, and the opposite of empowerment is disempowerment. The virtue here is the ability, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, to responsibly empower the resources, whether they're people, money, or other things that are required to drive innovation. So if we fail to appropriately empower those resources, in other words, if we say we give someone some rope, just enough to hang themselves, but not enough to be successful, or if we invest in a particular innovation, but not enough for it to really succeed, then fundamentally we're being irresponsible, we're disempowering. So one of the key things we need to do as leaders of innovation is to appropriately empower. And that often means making very tough choices. That often means making decisions so that, instead of trimming 20% off of 5 budgets, we cut 1 of 5 initiatives and really focus appropriately on ensuring that the other 4 succeed, just as an example. The point is, we can't do too much. If we try to do too much, we'll fail. So disempowerment is that 5th sin. Moving a step lower is moving down into the realm of creativity. And the label I give the sin here is painfully boring uncreativity. I mean, that's the absolute antithesis or opposite, of course, of creativity. But the whole idea here, this is the realm of taking ideas to reality. This is the realm of, within the human psyche, within psychology, of coming up with great ideas. It's thinking out of the box. It's connecting ideas. It's the whole ideas tornado of capturing lots of ideas. The concept that there's no such thing as a bad idea, that what we want is a funnel that's as wide as possible at the top to capture as many ideas as possible, and then to mix them together in the tornado. But ultimately, the real key here, of course, is that mixer, the tornado of taking the ideas down from the level at the top where you've got a wide funnel and focusing it so that you're really killing all the good ideas and focusing on the great ideas. So really great innovators will kill ideas that would otherwise consume resource and focus on just the great ideas that are going to become the game changers. And then the 7th sin, and in some ways it's certainly not least, it is last in a sense, but it's absolutely not least. I call it comfortable complacency. And it's related to the realm of motivation, of attitudes, beliefs, culture, mindset. And it's really, in strategic terms, it's where the rubber meets the road. It's where we implement strategy. It's the realm of performance and results. And in that realm of human behavior and attitudes and beliefs and motivations, complacency is the big killer for motivation. So this is where, and it can take many forms. It doesn't have to be tolerance of poor performance. That is certainly one of the ways that it manifests, is for organizations to, in effect, just not care, for people to stop caring. But equally, very successful organizations can also become complacent. They can think, oh, well, we're good enough, or, well, we innovated once and we don't need to do that anymore. And it's really amazing if you look at surveys of organizations and their attitudes towards motivation, towards innovation, how many organizations just think, They don't need to worry about it too much. And that's complacency. And that's, of course, that creates an innovation no-go zone. So that really takes us through much of the book. And the book ends with some specific prescriptions related to different types of enterprises. So one of them looks at revitalizing an enterprise, which I think lots of organizations need to look at. Another's for startups. Another chapter is specifically on family enterprises and some of the specific things that family enterprises need to worry about. I often say psychologically, a family enterprise is just like any other enterprise, except it usually has history or specific psychology related to the fact that it's a family. I have a chapter on getting ready to sell for organizations or for entrepreneurs who should be thinking about an exit strategy, service enterprises. So, because again, I think service enterprises face some specific challenges relative to, say, product enterprises that need to be thought about. And again, a lot of that is psychological. It's mindset and the whole approach to relationship to customers. And then public enterprises. And I end with that. But again, last but not least, I personally believe that leaders in government, not only elected politicians, but also civil servants, need to be far more innovative than they are. And we need a step change in terms of the ability of public enterprises to deliver value, to deliver more with less. Those of us who lived through and led through the 80s and so on in business and industry know that we did a lot of very painful change management and just fundamental paradigm shifts to enable us to do far more with less. And I believe that public enterprise needs to face up to that same reality. We can't just keep taxing business and enterprise more to keep funding the inefficiencies in government. We need to learn to shift paradigms and deliver far more value for our customers, our stakeholders, with far less resource than we currently might think is possible. So that's it, Wade, really. 21 chapters, 3 sections.
So Dave, you just went through a ton of great information. And so that leads to my next question, and this one's kind of tough to answer because I'm asking you to put everything that you just said into a nutshell. But if the reader could only take away one principle or action item out of your entire book, what would you want that to be?
I think it's that the success or failure of any innovation effort or any entrepreneurial effort is really all about the people. That if you're successful, it's going to be because of the people. And if you fail, it's because of the people. It's all down to psychology. And that's my bias, Wade. I'll be totally honest. That I suppose, going back to your earlier question, what's different about this book? I suppose it really is that this is about the psychology of innovation and entrepreneurship. Lots of people have written about innovation and entrepreneurship and offered different models and different insights. And I think there's a lot of fabulous stuff out there. And again, going back to what inspired me and what drove me, this is an effort to make sense of it all psychologically. In other words, to make sense of it all in terms of the behavior, the attitudes, the beliefs, the psychology of individuals and teams and relationships and all of that, right? So it's fundamentally an attempt to understand innovation and entrepreneurship, two sides of the same coin, in terms of human psychology.
Dave, do you have a favorite quote from your book?
Yeah, I do. It's one I kind of made up, but I borrowed from a quote which is from an anonymous source. And I'll remind you of that in a second. But my favorite quote is, if you're not living, leading, learning, and loving on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And And of course, I borrow that from one of my favorite sayings is that if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. But again, I think it's more than just about living. It's also very much about leadership. It's very much about learning. And fundamentally, I say it's about loving because, hey, if you're not loving it, stop doing it. You know, if you're no longer loving what you're doing, go find something that you do love doing. And any entrepreneur or anyone trying to innovate who isn't really loving it isn't going to get there, right? Fundamentally, in my view, innovation is about creating love, not just money, right? Because if our customers are loving it, then of course we're going to make tons of money, right? And if our employees, if all our stakeholders are really loving what we're doing, then we're going to create great value. We're going to create a better world.
So Dave, we're talking about some, you were talking about paradigm shifts earlier on, and that's what this next question is actually all about as well, is what's a book that you could recommend to our audience based on the way that it impacted your life and created a paradigm shift?
Well, there are many, but I think one of the most fundamental for me is a book by one of my mentors, a guy that I've known and worked with for many, many years, decades. And the book is called The Mandala of Being, subtitled Discovering the Power of Awareness. It's written by Dr. Richard Moss. Richard is, as I say, is a dear friend and mentor who I've known for decades. But really, it's fundamentally about relationships, and it's about the most fundamental relationships. It starts with the relationship to self. And the concept of the mandala is that the mandala, by the way, is a term that describes, in effect, think of a cross, and at the center is what you might think of as kind of the here and now. And then one dimension goes into the future, into the past. The other dimension goes into the other, or into the self. And fundamentally, the mandala of being, the book, is all about relationship. And it's all about the most important relationship, which is your relationship to yourself. In a sense, your sense of higher purpose, and so forth. And it's how we get dragged out of our sense of self, and in the now, we can get dragged into either thinking about the past or thinking about the future, thinking about stories related to others, or thinking about stories related to self that drag us out of the here and now. So that, to me, that's been an important concept. And then lots of other important concepts have also influenced me in piecing together the ideas that underlie the book and the whole psychology of innovation and entrepreneurship. But that's a powerful starting point.
So Dave, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our audience to get not only more information on you, but also your book?
Sure. Look at my website, drdaveinnovation.com, and you use that to connect with me. I'm happy to talk with people. I love talking, and I enjoy connecting with people. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you Google Dr. Dave and throw in innovation or strategy, last time I checked, I've come up number one on Google, my LinkedIn profile. So please connect with me, talk with me, share with me, and let's start some conversations. That's what I hope this book will do.
Excellent. And Dave, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book with us.
You're very welcome, Wade. Thank you for reaching out and asking me to have this chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Much appreciated.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like more information on Dave or his book, The 7 Sins of Innovation, check out the show notes at the elpodcast.com. Catch you next time.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.